Hello, my name's Gianni, and I'm the executive producer of SIFTER. If you look at the stats, any company in Australia lasting for 2 decades is an achievement. It's pretty rare. Most of them don't make it that long. It's even more of an achievement if you think about a company like Wicked Witch, which has been around since 2001, making games from the original Gameboy Color era all the way up until today, especially when you think about how the Australian game industry fared after the global financial crisis. They've made lots of licensed titles in sport, in Warhammer, and recently worked with Tantalus on the Age of Empires 2 remaster. I want to introduce you to Daniel Visser, who's the founder, one of the founders of the company, and we will learn a little bit today about what that experience was, learning how to make games, those very early days, and then pitching ideas off to companies, sending things all around the world in the early 2000s, before we were in this internet-connected era in the way that we are now, and what it takes to make a company that goes this long. A lot of it is luck. A lot of it's being in the right place. A lot of it is thinking about the projects you take on, but it's a really fascinating conversation. So let's jump in. If you like insightful discussions about those high-profile games that everyone's talking about, then why not check out SIFTER's other podcast, Mainstream, in your podcast feed right now. We talk about those high-profile titles, those AAAs, some of those other smaller indie darlings, featuring insights from the award-winning SIFTER team and other special guests. You can find Mainstream in your podcast player. That's on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or head to the SIFTER website, that's sifter.com.au. Now, Daniel, this year marks the 20th anniversary of Wicked Witch, founded in 2001. Can you tell me, how does it feel to be at this point? Did you think back in 2001 you'd have a 20-year-old business, or was it just something that has happened through, clever work and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's pretty well something that just happened, to be perfectly honest with you. I can, check my grey hairs as a bit of a testament to the fact that it's been 20 years. It seems to have gone awfully fast, to be perfectly honest. It kind of just started as myself and some mates hanging out and making games after working in a few studios in Victoria, and kind of just organically grew from there. And then at some point we started taking ourselves seriously.
20 years in Australian game development is quite a long time. Some of the studios that people would remember, the really big pinnacles of ones didn't really even last that long. It's a real achievement to do that. What do you kind of chalk that up to? Is it just sort of being in the background, doing a lot of contract work sort of stuff?
Oh, I think it's just perseverance, mate. It's just just hard work. Never say die. Is probably That's right, exactly. Bit of elbow grease, hard-working boys from the suburbs, just giving it a crack, and probably a bit of luck and support along the way, I'd say.
Can you let's go back into your history as well. So tell me a little bit about how you started, because you mentioned there it's like you and a bunch of mates just kind of got together and started making games. Take me right back to the beginning.
Sure. I'll give you a quick history. It probably starts actually when I was 6 years old, but I won't focus too much on that because I don't remember it too well. But my parents bought me a Commodore VIC-20 computer. I'm not sure how old you are, but Commodore VIC-20 and Commodore 64s were all the rage in the 80s, in the 8-bit era. So I had one of those, and that was like 6 or 7, and I just fell in love with video games. It was like literally Choplifter and a Pac-Man rip-off, and Cops and Robbers, and I probably had 4 games on cassette tape, and I just fell in love with it. Before long, you get sick of those games, and you start actually just fiddling around with the thing. I was always one of those kids who pulled shit apart and played with electric motors. Loved my Lego, loved drawing. One of those kids. Probably hung out in the library a fair bit at primary school. And so I kind of just taught myself programming in the language of BASIC when I was just in primary school. And then I got to the point where I kind of was writing my own text adventures in primary school. And I think it was then I had a mate, and we and I kind of had this I had a fantasy that I was going to make video games and release them. And I think that kind of just stuck and never really left. I just loved video games, and I followed. I was a Commodore guy up until had an Amiga computer in high school, and I kind of was. I was the nerd at the square who was, helping teachers fix their computers, and it's the computer geek because we didn't have. There were no computers in our high school, of course. There was. I think we had a computer and had some Apple IIs in it, or a Micro B in the library or something. That was about it. I went to college, studying programming. I was trying to learn. By the way, I would get magazines and try and get books. I couldn't get my hands on anything to learn how to make video games, so I was just feeling around and poking around and really just trying to teach myself while playing games and spending all my spare money down at the arcades. I loved, it goes back as far as Galaga and whatever, but I loved, like Golden Axe and Double Dragon and all those games kind of really just fueled my my love for both the art and the experiences of video games. So I knew I wanted to do it. I was into it and I was trying to do it. And I just couldn't find anything. I tried joining some clubs, but there weren't really many around. Swap meets was a thing, shareware was a thing, and eventually I tried to join some night schools, but so I either got told I was too young, or it was just logistically too difficult. My parents, supported me, trying to help me find ways for me to learn, drive me all around the place. After high school, I went to TAFE because it was either computer science for like 4 or 5 years. And I didn't want to do that. I was too impatient. So I found a computer programming course out at Eastern College at TAFE, which is now Swinburne. And I did that for a couple of years, basically business programming. And that was pretty easy because I kind of taught myself programming for the most part, got introduced to other languages. And then I got plucked out of my second year by a company called Torus Games, who is still around today. So they're older than us, and that was my first job. I was like the fourth dude there, and I started working on Game Boy and in coding in assembler. So you've got a Game Boy picture behind that. I'll get to that in a moment. I worked there for a few years, and then I went and joined a company called Melbourne House. Actually, as a matter of fact, would you believe I pulled out this Melbourne House t-shirt? This is like 25, 26 years old, this t-shirt. I pulled that out of the drawer this morning because they're all my t-shirts are black. And I was like, well, that's probably pretty apt if I'm going to talk about the history. I'll get to stand up and show my t-shirt. So I worked there. I was pretty stoked to work there because as a kid, I'd bought games from Melbourne House, and I never knew if the Melbourne House on the cassette cover was Melbourne, the Melbourne that I lived in, and I hoped it was, but I never quite knew because you couldn't look it up. There's no internet, there's no CD-ROMs, there's no mobile phones going on. Back then, we used to upload our ROMs that we made. If we made Game Boy games, we used to upload our ROMs on a bulletin board, basically, just before Windows 95. And, we used to use a modem to directly upload our ROMs over to the UK. At Melbourne House, I got into 3D. Video cards were new. The first Voodoo series video cards, and I just dropped my jaw when I saw what 3D video cards did. I was just amazed. I always loved 3D. I loved early flat shaded polygon 3D games on the Amiga, and so when I saw 3D video cards, I was like, "Wow, that's awesome!" So I did everything, all kinds of programming. I programmed full games. I did AI. I did artwork. I did QA. I did sound. I wrote sound, sound programs and MIDI synthesizer mods and things like that. Because back in those days, you did everything. It was almost a one-man show. At Melbourne House, we worked on bigger teams. I did physics programming and some graphics programming there. You'd go get the big physics book out of. I never really was very good at physics in high school. I was actually not that good at maths in high school either. Ironically, I ended up using Pythagoras' theorem every single day of my programming life. So, don't say, when will I ever use this? Because I didn't really like it then, but I ended up using it every damn day. Fast forward, I went back to Torus for a little while. And then I don't exactly know what the reason was, but I think I was making a game at home on Game Boy in my spare time. Like I was working at the office like day, night, sleeping under the desk, like pulling long hours just because I was passionate and we all loved it. But then, like glutton for punishment. I'd go home and work on my own stuff. I loved Warcraft. I loved RTS games. I loved Doom. These were all the things that really captured my imagination and inspired me. And these are the kind of things I was trying to make. I really loved multiplayer when it was new, playing, going to LANs and, setting up LANs in my house, just pulling apart cables and hooking up, building, networks and things like that. I was into that, and so were my nerdy mates. I'm basically an adult by this time, mind you. But that's what my weekends were doing. And so I was making a little kind of Warcraft clone on the Game Boy, a little RTS game. I called it War Monster. It was all these monsters that could fight. And then I think I wanted to get that published, and so that was kind of the start of it. I jumped on a plane and flew over to the E3 Electronic Entertainment Expo over in Los Angeles, and tried to sell my game. Just rocked up, just went in there with my Game Boy. I think me and my mate from high school, who became our art director and has been working with me for about 20 years, we were just printing out business cards and gluing them to cardboard. Like the night before I had to hop on the plane, I really didn't have much idea what I was doing. And then I just went over there by myself and just knocked on the doors of, Ubisoft and EA and Square Enix and whatever, and just said, hey, I've got this game. But it went pretty well. I kind of signed a couple of deals while I was over there. I handshook on a few deals while I was over there, and I thought, all right, here we go. I've got a deal with Ubisoft to publish my game, and everyone liked it. And I was like, sweet. So I came home, and I was like, all right, we're set. Here we go. The empire begins. And then I think I got my first real business lesson, which was, what is said in a meeting doesn't actually correspond to a deal
unless you've got it on paper.
Money. And one by one. Exactly. I've learned that even our heads of agreement on paper doesn't really mean anything until the money's in the bank in a lot of ways. So that was my first kind of big lesson in business. But I was already by myself. I was like, shit, I better find some work then. So through a friend of a friend, we started working. I went back to Game Boy after doing PC 3D stuff at Melbourne House. So I went back to Game Boy, coined the name Wicked Witch. We're going to call ourselves the Wizards of Oz. And I thought, oh, that's pretty clever because, we're programming wizards or gaming wizards, and we're in Australia, Oz. How clever are we? And I think when I searched an ASIC register, I found it was like 167 businesses in Australia called Wizards of Oz, or the Wizard of Oz. I was like, everything from hairdressers to bricklayers to whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, that's not very, very cool. We're in the eastern suburbs, so somehow through probably drunk conversation or whatever, we got to, we'll be the Wicked Witch of the East instead. We thought we were pretty progressive, having like a female avatar at the time, and we're like, oh yeah, that'll stand out a bit. We'll do that, and then, I don't know, it just kind of stuck. It was the only name that everyone did.
That's quite a good naming policy, quite often. So if everyone
that was as good as it got.
That first game you worked on, does it still exist in any form, or is it completely gone now? Do you still have like a ROM cart?
Yeah, I think I still have a ROM file. I still have the homebrew kit somewhere in the bowels of the office at Wicked Witch. It exists. Actually, there's a few kind of obscure Game Boy fan sites that have reached out to us, and we've sent the ROM to. It turned up at a swap. Someone bought a whole bunch of like old Game Boy garbage. So I had sent the ROM to somebody at some point. They'd burnt it onto a cartridge, and it had found its way into like a computer junk heap that somebody bought and got going. And I got this random email like 20 years later just saying, what is this game? I was never 100% finished though. I only really finish it to 75%, but it exists. It lives on fondly in our memories as well.
And in your hearts. Can you tell me a little bit, because a lot of the work you've done is work like the game that is behind me on licensed properties and doing those deals. How did those sort of first deals come about? What was the connection that allowed you to kind of put something together that meant that you got some paper, you got some money, and you're able to produce things that people could play?
Yeah, good question. So the first contracts kind of came from a friend of a friend, like recommended. There was a company in the UK doing called Crawfish Interactive. They were doing some games. That was the Alien game behind you. From memory, something had happened to that project, and it was in a bit of trouble or whatever. And they just said, "Can you help?" And I remember I stayed up day and night and rebuilt the game from scratch. In about 12 weeks, I think, from start to finish, and just like bashed it out. Didn't sleep. Just coffee and cigarettes. I think kept me going, and kind of just bashed that game out. And then after that, looking for work, there was a site called Gamasutra, which was an early kind of site just that I used to hang out on, and there was a jobs forum on that, and so I just pitched on that, and that's how we got a few contracts. We started working for THQ ValueSoft, doing like, so, those bargain bin CD-ROMs with like solitaire packs or jigsaw puzzle games and shit like that. We did that. It wasn't too bad because we got paid out of the US, and the Australian exchange rate was like 55 cents to the US dollar. So that's when I realized when it came to kind of exporting and we had an advantage. So there were some good times. That kind of got us our start, and all of this was done pretty well in my study at my house with my two young kids at the time. And then I moved. I bought a 2-bedroom unit down the street, and that became our first office.
Kind of continuing on as well, I'm just curious because you've kind of worked. If you look through the history of WikiWitch, you've kind of worked your way through the multiple different platforms over the last 20 years. Is there a one that holds a really close place in your heart? One that you think, man, I had some great times when we were developing for PSP or whatever it ended up being?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. I guess the Game Boy probably still resonates. I ended up, at Torus. I did a few games on Game Boy. I did a couple on my own, and Crawfish. I think Shannon and I did three or four Game Boy games. There was something about the challenge of such limited resources. I think it was a 1 megabyte cartridge, so the whole game, sound, graphics, programming, everything had to fit in 1 megabyte or half a megabyte, 512K. And I think the CPU was a 1 megahertz CPU. You only had 7 assembly instructions. So something about the building something out of almost nothing. I think when we got our dev kit, it was literally 5 photocopied pieces of paper. There was just the architecture, the CPU and the memory maps and whatever, just the diagrams of the hardware, and that's all you got. Like there was no text. You couldn't print something to a screen. You had to write your own font and your own screen thing to eventually print. And so there was something about that I think was good. But I love the Wii motion controllers. That was a good time in video games. The dawn of the iPhone as well was pretty good. That was a pretty revolutionary piece of hardware, and of course, Xbox and PlayStation. Just you always just look forward to the next ones of those. I'm a PC gamer still at heart in a lot of ways, so tough question to answer.
Can we talk a little bit about all the sports games that you've worked on over the years? Because you've had a really strong connection to both AFL and NRL, as well as different series across heaps of different things. What is it like to build a game to a license like that? These are the biggest codes in the country. These games, I think should be the biggest games in the country just about, because everyone almost watches some sporting code in Australia, just about. What is it like to build a game for those and sort of meeting the expectations of what players want from a game, the speed and the action of AFL or, the tactical sort of play of NRL?
Good question. I mean, there's something romantic about being Australians using Australian content to be played by Australians. I think that's really special. Like, proud and privileged that we've had that opportunity. Fans love it and they hang out for it and they play it and it does. They are number one sellers in the country for those few weeks when they come out, and so and the fans are super passionate. So, there's lots of good things about it. Working with the AFL is awesome, and, just meeting all the dudes and, going to all the stadiums and traveling the country. And, there's heaps of fans in the studio that get their kicks out of meeting their heroes. And the same for rugby, which, is also in France, South Africa, and New Zealand, of course, and England. So there's a bit of a thrill about that. But then there's the challenge as well. Like the challenge is I can't put it into words. It's kind of insurmountable. Like it's almost impossible because you want to make Australia's EA FIFA, right? That's what you want to make. Those projects are $50-100 million budget. I think they have more people just making the kind of generic players than we have on our entire development team. I think our budget is like 2%. Or whatever of their 2 or 3% of their budget, something like that. I worked it out once upon a time. Just so the challenge to bridge that gap to try and make FIFA on 2 or 3% of the budget is tough, and the only way we can really do it is by just going above and beyond. Just because we're passionate, and it's a tribute to all the people at Wicked Witch. They love video games, and a lot of them love the sports and love what they do. So we just work day and night, man, and work through holidays and Christmas and just do whatever it takes to make ends meet to get to the best thing we possibly can. So it's tough, we do our best. We know we can't kind of compete because you can only sell a certain amount in the country, right? And that's why the price has to be what it is, and the content has to be what it is. And we punch a fair bit above our weight, actually, when you see what we have to work with.
I'm interested as well because you had a hand in working on the Age of Empires 2 remaster, a game I'm pretty sure you must have played back in the day. What does it feel like to rebuild a game like that, to recapture the feeling of playing that game, if not the actual gameplay, because, things have moved on since then?
Absolutely. So it was pretty cool when it came along with our friends at THANATOS here in Melbourne as well, when we were talking about doing it. And I think they were going to do Age of Empires 3, and they asked if we wanted to do Age of Empires 2. And secretly, I was like, "Yeah, man, we'll do Age of Empires 2. That was the better one." I think I know it wasn't 2D, and they wanted to do the 3D one. I think that was a big part of it. But Age of Empires 2 was one of my favorite games of all time. I think. Tough to pick your favorite games of all time, but it was in my top 3. If my top 3 were like probably World of Warcraft, Age of Empires, and I probably have to say Minecraft these days. If you just look at hours spent playing, I guess they're probably. And so when that opportunity came along, like we used to play in the office, like we used to play it like all weekend, and it was. It was our reward for a long day and night's work. Someone would start a server, and then we'd play Age of Empires 2. That's what we did, and we just absolutely loved it. So when that opportunity came along to work with Microsoft, we were pretty stoked. Again, the reality sets in. There are budgets, there are timelines, and it was a big job. We had some help, so I think all the artwork was made overseas and rezzed up, and it was our job to kind of compress it down and make sure it just fit and ran and worked. We had some help with some of the original members that worked on the original, kind of scattered around Europe. The project was run by Microsoft out of the States, and we kind of did the rest. And it was good. Like we wanted to preserve it as best as we could because we were fans of the games. What you don't realize is that the community is so massive with so many millions of players that it actually soon unraveled to having to support all the mods and the modding community and all the stuff that they had put in. And then, there's all the tournament dudes, all the people who are hardcore passionate about the game. Working with Microsoft was cool because they wanted to do crossplay between, the Steam version and the Windows version, which hadn't been done before, and so we just wanted to look and feel just smooth and new, but still be the same game. We actually had a problem when we were getting towards the end that it looked like it was 4 times quadruple the resolution, and I had animations, and it had 32 degrees of rotation instead of 8 and whatever. It was like significant, like normal mapped water and all this stuff. But there's a thing that happens in video games. I was talking about the old ones. This thing called rose-colored glasses, right? You remember a game so fondly. I don't know if you've ever done it. You ever gone back and played one of your favorite games like 10, 20 years ago?
Yeah, and you realize even as recently as playing a game like Skyward Sword on the Wii, which has just come out, and loved that game at the time, cannot play it now. Even the camera controls are impossible to,
I know,
cannot get through.
It's even Mario 64. I'm just like, wow, is this really the camera that seemed revolutionary and awesome at the time? That's right. So I think when they were doing focus tests, they kind of said, no one thinks it looks any different. They're like, they think it's the same game. As last time we're like, what? But it's got this, it's got this. They don't care because that's how they remember it. They didn't care that it was on a 1024 by 768 monitor. Now it's in freaking 4K pristine glory. But they're just like, they think it's the same game. So that was cool. We got to be really creative then at that point. And we started basically just adding bling and shine, and we put in dust particles behind all the horses, and and nice shines, and god rays out of the buildings when things upgraded, and just tried to crank up the shine kind of at the last minute, actually just before the E3 unveiling. So we just kind of cranked all that, but it was really good experience.
Is this something you learnt about the game that you sort of realized, only after the fact that, the sort of duct tape and everything that was taken to put that thing together that
Yeah, it was a bit like that. I mean, it was old, man. Like, we did have the original kind of code and stuff as reference, and we used what we could. But we had to rewrite the entire networking architecture, and there was no separation between game engine and game code, which is what you do these days. But back then you didn't. It was all just written bespoke or kind of all in one, and it was optimized for that hardware, Pentium 90s, Pentium 100s, whatever it was back in the day, all single threaded, wasn't ready for multi-core processors. The networking was very integrated to everything. Even like the way the sounds would play and stuff like that. So it was interesting to see. It was state of the art at the time, but technology has moved on since then.
There's an interesting movement at the moment where a lot of the games that I grew up with playing in the early days are now starting to see their remaster, and there's a big market for it. How does that make you feel in terms of balancing the fact that these games are getting remade so that people can replay them and relive a bit of that experience versus making new games that, sort of take things further, and in 20 years' time, people will be like, we need the remaster of whatever came out in 20.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I don't know if I really saw it coming, to be perfectly honest. Like, they used to kind of make new slick versions of Pac-Man and stuff like that, but really doing remasters and remakes has become a thing now. I think I like it. I'm into it because you did enjoy those games, and like I said, the old ones just don't really stack up anymore. There's a thing that I tell people that is kind of somewhat unique to video games, I think. When you compared like movie sequels and movie remakes, they're often not as good as the original. Even follow-up albums from bands and things like that can be disappointing, and that's in fact often the trend. They can't recapture the magic or the certain that game had. But video games, the sequels tend to be better. And the games tend to get better and better, and they tend to get iterated on. And I think remastering is kind of just part of that. Video games are never finished either. Like when you finish it, there's always more stuff you wanted to do and you wanted to put in, but you just didn't have the time and budget. So I like it. I'm into it. And I think, if they can remake a film, every 15 years now or whatever, less. Sometimes they may remake it like 12, 13 years later. What, didn't that just come out? I think remastering video games is a cool idea. I just bought the Diablo 2 remaster. I haven't looked at it yet, but I'm keen to check out that. I had a bit of a play of Far Cry 6 last night because it's a 6.1. It'll just be better. I've already had the graphics details better. It's a newer console. The hardware's better. So video games just kind of keep getting better.
Is there anything that you wish you'd had the chance to remaster? Any potential projects, if anyone's listening and they say, oh, maybe we could get Wicked Witch to remaster this particular beloved series?
Well, that's a tricky question. Put me on the spot there a bit. I'd probably say Ultima springs to mind. The first MMO was Ultima Online. Well, one of the first MMOs was Ultima Online, and I had a very special place for that game. So maybe Ultima would work. Some of those old RPGs, Dungeon Master. I'm a bit of an RPG guy, I suppose. So they kind of work for me. I think they're doing Half-Life, aren't they? The Half-Life is still going. That was pretty special when it came out. Doom is always getting remade and remastered. So Warcraft is always evolving. So lots of the classics are already doing it, but I think it's some of those kind of hidden gems like Ultima maybe need another go.
Daniel, I feel like we could chat for ages, but it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much for being part of the show, telling us a little bit of the history of Wicked Witch. here's to another 20 years. We'll talk to you in 20 years' time, hey? Or hopefully not before then, at least.
Yeah, look, I'd like to give a shout out to Melbourne International Games Week as well. It's a time when we all come together and celebrate. I know some of the guys from the office have been attending the GCAP conference earlier this week, which is proudly supported by by our local government here. You know that more than 50% of the game development studios are in Melbourne, Victoria. It's the place to be for video games. Film Victoria, got us started with grants and support, and the Victorian government puts a lot into Melbourne Games Week. So it's a bit tough during these times. Usually PAX is on, and everyone kind of flocks in, and it's a really good time to see games, meet people, and celebrate it. So I encourage anybody to try and take part virtually if they can. And I just want to be thankful that. We're here in Victoria, Australia, still making games.
That's Daniel Visser from Wicked Witch. SIFTER is produced by Nicholas Kennedy, Fiona Bartholomaeus, Daniel Ang, Sarah Ireland, Viv Thumb, Adam Christou. Mitch Lowe is our senior producer. My name's Gianni Giovanni. I'm the executive producer. You can find links to everything we spoke about on this episode on our website. That's sifter.com.au, including a bunch of other things as well. We've got articles, we've got gameplay, we've got other videos and other interviews with creatives in game development from all around the world. While you're online, why not join our community? We're giving away games. We talk about creative works that we are putting together. It's just a nice supportive place. That's on Discord, and you can go to sifter.com.au/Discord to join. One of the best things you can do is share the show with your friends. It's free. Tell them if you reckon they'll like it. Give them a recommendation. It means a lot if you actually recommend something to someone else, even better than us telling them. So if you think we do a good job, you've had an interesting time, and you share that, that'll mean a big difference. If you've got a bit of extra cash around and you want to support us to get to events, to buy new equipment, to cover news stories, you can go to the SIFTER store. That's sifter.store. We've got a bunch of video game inspired unique designs that you can pick up, a bunch of different t-shirts there, lots of cool ones that you can enjoy. That's sifter.store. That's all for now. Until next time, have fun.